Hello, so we're going to do a little tool like collar here, demo. I'm going to use a few techniques. You can see I've sketched it and I've left a lot of angularity in the line drawing because that helps us with the body of the tool. It has that like stiff, straight lines with breaking points. We're also going to use a lot of water instead of gel medium as we're laying down transparent layers because the graininess that encourages will actually sort of help us establish that it's tool. So I am using a straight edge brush to keep my angularity in there, and I'm using a very transparent layer, a lot of water, and a kind of pinky red to build in some washes. I would paint the collar maybe after the body, but before the head, if I were doing the whole painting, so that I could put the head on top of it, but layered over the body, so that what you're seeing underneath is finished, essentially. This I'm mixing just a touch of gel medium into and a brighter red, so less pink, because I would like to get some nice fine lines. So if I did that with water, they'd have a tendency more to blur, but by doing it with gel medium, we keep sharper, denser edges. Also, I don't want them to all just be lines, so some of them I'm making into larger shapes of, sides of things, sides of wrinkles. At tulle, we're going to get build up. It's going to get darker and more opaque anytime it folds over itself a number of times. So for each fold, it gets a little bit darker. So that floating section in the back seems the most transparent. You can see the background wash through it. But as we move towards the front, where we're getting it both foreshortened, so it's stacked kind of as it goes away from us and also stacked in multiple layers, we're going to get more solid. I like to underpaint my shadows, so I'm using a bit of purple, and I'm now using a pointed round brush because I can get some more variation of line, smaller, tighter lines. You can use sort of a hesitating brush stroke. You don't want it to be too perfect or too smooth. You can use kind of a skipping, hesitating stroke and get a little choppy with it. It can help you create those like angular shadows. But they're still very diffused. They're not very like punchy. I'm going to darken a few choice ones, especially on the side of the head over here and in our deepest valleys. But as it moves towards the light and gets hotter on the right-hand side, I'm going to put less shadows towards that outside corner. So I went ahead and let that all dry, or used a blow dryer. And I'm going to do some glazes with a bit of that hotter red. So I'm still using a bit of water, more water than normal maybe, but I'm also using a touch of gel medium to help it hold together. And I'm creating sort of long vertical lines, but then also focusing on where the waves would stack up on the outside hem of this. Getting some angular shapes there to help us define the like build of the piece, even though it might be a little exaggerated. You can see where it layers over the purple, they sort of meld together and become a little less punchy. Now, depending on style, you could leave this much more wishy-washy. You could make it a little more opaque. I'm going to keep pushing it, but depending on what style you're going for, it might be more of a washy approach using that kind of watercolor feeling, or you can keep adding more opacity and more contrast. I like this little bit of defining dancing line quality. It has an illustration-y quality to it that I enjoy, but it does also help define how it's actually built. And is semi-true to life, as when it tears on the edge, it rolls up sometimes, and that's when we get that more firm edge. So I'm going to use a little bit of white with a gel medium and just glaze a few areas so that they have lower opacity, and also to give us some highlights back. It's got a little tiny bit of the red in there. They're kind of mixing together because some things are still wet, and that's okay with me. If you want to be more controlled, wait on your bottom layer to dry. So once I get these kind of very soft, very subtle white highlights in there, I'm going to go ahead and dry this, and I'm going to brush up on my line work, sort of push it to the foreground so we can look at finding final contrast. So one way you can add in highlights, final touches, is with a colored pencil. The graininess of it going over the acrylic actually kind of nicely fits in with the idea of tulle. And that way you can get some nice, really fine lines. It can be quick. But if you don't have one or you're not interested in that exploration, you can also, of course, do it with paint. So that's sort of what it would look like with colored pencil. We're going to go over some of those with our white paint. Now that everything's dry, you'll see that it doesn't mix as much. It's not going to be as pink. It's going to be more like punchy. You can also use colored pencils to do the shadows. Sorry, I forgot that I did that. Or to brush up edges, things like that. I'm able to use colored pencils over my acrylic because I don't create a lot of texture when I'm painting usually. And because they're absorbing into the Bristol board more than they might on like a canvas or something. But even on a canvas, you can get some kind of great textures with them. Just make sure you don't push too hard. And I hope that that helps.